Welcome to the Republican Professor. I'm your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. It's for January 2026, years after Jesus. Welcome to the new year. We're in the Trivium today, starting a new series, The Liberal Arts of Logic, Grammar, and Rhetoric. We're going to be in conversation with Sister Miriam Joseph, who has a Ph.D. Understanding the Nature and Function of Language. I highly recommend this book, Paul Dry Books. It's edited by Marguerite McGlinn, and this one, Marguerite's edition, was published in 2002. But Sister Miriam Joseph originally got this out in 1937. She's no longer with us. Otherwise, I'd have her come on as a guest on the podcast. So we have to have her join the podcast through her writing and our conversation with her work in The Trivium, the liberal arts of logic, grammar, and rhetoric by Sister Miriam Joseph, PhD. Um, the first chapter is called The Liberal Arts. We're going to do make a fair use of this, do a transformative reading, and have some interaction with it, have some discussion, and pass on this tradition to those who might not be aware of it. Uh, Starting on page 3, her chapter 1 here in this edition, in the Paul Dry Books edition. It's a very attractive edition. Go out and get a copy of this. Have a physical copy of it as you follow along. Don't do online books. Do physical copies if you can. Of course, if you can't, then yeah, online, I guess, is the next best thing, I guess. But I don't like it. Just letting you know, I don't think Sister Miriam would like it either. She starts by her chapter 1, which is the focus of today's episode, talking about the liberal arts. In fact, that's what she calls chapter 1, the liberal arts. Can I make a comparison already? Why, thank you. We're doing this series called Illiberal Education, The Politics of Race and Sex on Campus by Dinesh D'Souza. I want you to notice the title of this, Illiberal Education. Whereas Sister Miriam is talking about the liberal arts. We got liberal education versus illiberal education. What's the difference? Well, that's the focus of what we're talking about. So hang in there. You're going to get an answer to that question. If you're asking that question, good for you. That's the appropriate question to ask. The liberal arts, Sister Miriam starts on page 3 of this edition, denote the 7 branches of knowledge that initiate the young into a life of learning. The concept is classical, but the term liberal arts and the division of the arts into the trivium and the quadrivium date from the Middle Ages. The trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium includes those aspects of the liberal arts that pertain to the mind, and the quadrivium, those aspects of the liberal arts that pertain to matter. Logic, grammar, and rhetoric constitute the trivium. And arithmetic, music, geometry, and astronomy constitute the quadrivium. Logic is the art of thinking. Grammar, the art of inventing symbols and combining them to express thought. And rhetoric, the art of communicating thought from one mind to another, the adaptation of language to circumstance. Arithmetic, the theory of number, and music, an application of the theory of number, the measurement of discrete quantities in motion, are the arts of discrete quantity or number. Geometry, the theory of space, and astronomy, an application of the theory of space, are the arts of continuous quantity or extension. So what do we have? We have the trivium, the three arts of language pertaining to the mind. Logic, the art of thinking. Grammar, the art of inventing and combining symbols. Rhetoric, the art of communication. Quadrivium, the four arts of quantity pertaining to matter. Discrete quantity or number. Arithmetic, the theory of number. Music, application of the theory of number. Continuous quantity, you have geometry, the theory of space, and astronomy, application of the theory of space. Page 4 at the top. These arts of reading, writing, and reckoning have formed the traditional basis of liberal education, each constituting both a field of knowledge and the technique to acquire that knowledge. The degree Bachelor of Arts is awarded to those who demonstrate the requisite proficiency in these arts, and the degree Master of Arts to those who have demonstrated a greater proficiency. I'm going to take a drink of water, hang out. I'm going to pause. I'm not pausing it, I'm muting it. So hang. Are you still there? Oh, good. You are. Happy 2026, by the way. Merry New Year and a happy Christmas. It's the 11th day of Christmas today. It's still the Christmas season in the Anglican tradition. No, I'm not Catholic. I'm Protestant. But we do benefit from Catholic educational heritage. That's what we're doing. I went to a Catholic school for one of my 7 degrees. I have a Master of Arts in Bioethics from the Bioethics Institute at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. I also taught there for over a decade. Guess what I taught? I taught this stuff. I taught this stuff. The very first class I was hired to teach, 2006, was critical thinking, which is basically logic. And it's essentially the trivium at the college level. The I also taught that semester philosophy of human nature, which is, of course, the standard Jesuit course. Standard, I'm not sure Catholic or not, but definitely the Jesuits seemed to like it at the time. They later dropped that course. I don't know why, because philosophy of human nature was an absolute bomb to teach. It's great. I loved it. Took me a while to figure out how to teach it, but once I got the hang of it, I really enjoyed it. And I think those were very fruitful, many years of fruitful ministry. And I'm grateful to the Lord for them. Today, as Sister Miriam continues on page 4, as in centuries past, a mastery of the liberal arts is widely recognized as the best preparation for work in professional schools, such as those of medicine, law, engineering, or theology. Those who first perfect their own faculties through liberal education are thereby better prepared to serve others in a professional or other capacity. The 7 liberal arts differ essentially from the many utilitarian arts such as carpentry, masonry, ethics, plumbing, salesmanship, printing, editing, banking, law, medicine, or the care of souls. I threw ethics in there as a joke because of utilitarianism and okay, never mind. And from the seven fine arts: architecture, instrumental music, sculpture, painting, literature, the drama, and the dance. Yeah, all right. There's lots of artistic people out there. If you've seen the film Rain Man, it's about an artistic person. For both the utilitarian arts, that was a joke, by the way. For both the utilitarian arts and the fine arts are transitive activities, whereas the essential characteristic of the liberal arts is that they are imminent or intransitive activities. What the heck does that mean? She's about to tell you. The utilitarian artist produces utilities that serve the wants of humanity. The fine artist, if he is of the highest order, produces a work that is a thing of beauty and joy forever. And both, and that has the power to elevate the human spirit. In the exercise of both the utilitarian and the fine arts, although the action begins in the agent, it goes out from the agent and ends in the object produced and usually has a commercial value. And therefore, the artist is paid for the work. In the exercise of the liberal arts, however, the action begins in the agent and ends in the agent, who is perfected by the action. Consequently, the liberal artist, far from being paid for his hard work, of which he receives the sole and full benefit, usually pays a teacher to give needed instruction and guidance in the practice of the liberal arts. The intransitive character of the liberal arts may be better understood from the following analogy. Here's an analogy: the intransitive character of the liberal arts, okay? The carpenter planes the wood, the rose blooms. The action of the transitive verb, like planes, begins in the agent but goes across and ends in the object, the wood. The action of an intransitive verb, like blooms, begins in the agent, that would be the rose, and ends in the agent, the rose, which is perfected by blooming. Now there's classes of goods. We're on page 5 at the top. Again, the book that we're interacting with here is the Trivium. The liberal arts of logic, grammar, and rhetoric. This particular copy is Paul Dry Books, 2002, edited by Marguerite McGlinn, but the text is Sister Miriam Joseph's Ph.D., who originally wrote it in 1937, or at least she published it back then. I don't know when she wrote it. She was an educator in the Catholic tradition back when it wasn't normal for women to have PhDs. Actually, it's still not normal. Thank God that only I think 1% of anybody has a PhD, and so it's sort of like getting your trident, in the SEALs or something intellectually. That's what it's supposed to be. But gosh, with all the grade inflation that's coming down the pike, I don't know what it's going to turn into in the next 15 years. I don't like what they've done to the bachelor's degree. I don't like what they've done to the master's degree. Oh my gosh, they just keep eroding the value. It sucks, man. Okay, let's continue. Classes of goods. The three classes of goods, valuable, useful, and pleasurable, illustrate the same type of distinction that exists among the arts. Valuable goods are those which are not only desired for their own sake, but which increase the intrinsic worth of their possessor. For instance, knowledge, virtue, and health are valuable goods. Useful goods are those which are desired because they enable one to acquire valuable goods. For instance, food, medicine, money, tools, and books are useful goods. Pleasurable goods are those which are desired for their own sake because of the satisfaction they give their possessor. For instance, happiness and honorable reputation, social prestige, flowers, and savory food are pleasurable goods. Yep. They do not add to the intrinsic worth of their possessor. You're telling me bacon doesn't help me become intrinsically worthy? I think that's what he's saying. A cigar doesn't do that. They don't add to the intrinsic worth of their possessor, nor are they desired as a means, yet they may be associated with valuable goods or useful goods. Okay. So, what would the diamond be? Valuable good, useful good, or pleasurable good? That's a quiz I would give you in class. What would a diamond be? I have lots of students that will say valuable. No. Valuable goods are those like knowledge, virtue, and health, right? Would you trade your health for a diamond, or would you trade a diamond for something that made you healthy from dying? You would probably use a diamond as money to pay somebody to make you healthy, like a doctor, probably. Or you probably would use a diamond to pay to get out of a Nazi concentration camp or try to escape through the Iron Curtain. So it's a form of money, it's a useful good, but it's also a pleasurable good. So it could be, for example, something that increases your reputation or social prestige to have a diamond on you, wouldn't it? It doesn't make you more intrinsically worthwhile as a human being, though, to have a diamond. So it could be a pleasurable good, it could be a useful good, depending. Um, how about a bicycle? Okay, it's probably a useful good, right? But it's also pleasurable. Okay. What about, so in other words, anything that could be used as money that is a pleasurable good could also be a useful good and under this. It's interesting. I mean, like what do I mean by money? Well, if you're in prison, okay. Um, we do these thought experiments. They're called thought experiments. So if you think it's a little bit jarring to go, well, if you're in prison or in a Nazi, it's just a way of thinking through these ideas here, these categories, making sure you understand them. Yeah, maybe people want to smoke in prison. They want to have cigarettes. They would love to have cigars. Geez, like a nice cigar. Well, those would be pleasurable goods. But if you're not going to use them for that, you're going to use them to get something else, then they would be useful, like as a form of exchange, basically money. They're basically money. So whoever has the cigarettes, that's basically cash. Okay. I think you get the idea. The valuable goods is really what's we're focusing on here for the liberal arts. Virtue, knowledge, and health. Your mental health too. Okay. Now, happiness, an honorable reputation, social prestige, flowers, savory food are pleasurable goods. They do not add to the intrinsic worth of their possessor, nor are they desired as a means. They could be, though, because, if they're used as money, just FYI. Yet, they may be associated with valuable goods or useful goods. For instance, knowledge, which increases worth, may at the same time be pleasurable. That's definitely true. Ice cream, which is nourishing food, promotes health. Can you tell she wrote this in 1937? Sister Miriam Joseph. She's, oh, God bless you. Ice cream is nourishing food, promotes health. Well, maybe back then. I can understand that. She wrote, I mean, she published this during the Great Depression, you know, and is at the same time enjoyable. The utilitarian or servile arts enable one to be a servant of another person, of the state, of a corporation, or of a business, and to earn a living. The liberal arts, in contrast, teach one how to live. They train the faculties and bring them into perfection. They enable a person to rise above his material environment, to live an intellectual, a rational, and therefore a free life in gaining truth. I would also add here, as someone who has a PhD in public law, I'm very concerned about this, of what our educational system is doing to the United States citizen. Our criminal justice system presumes that citizens have these liberal arts and have been perfected to some degree. To even sit on a jury, I mean, think about having a jury system. You want people that understand logic. Yeah, you want people that understand grammar and rhetoric, the art of communication. You'd better. Our entire criminal justice system assumes this, let alone voting. Voting. The American voter, Lord have mercy on us. Lord have mercy. Originally, that's why the right to vote was restricted to people who had these qualities. Not just anybody could vote. You have the right to vote. You're talking about the right to vote. How about focusing for a minute, which according to the kids would be like a decade now because they've redefined terms all the time. How about deserving the right to vote? I mean, that's a discussion you never hear about, deserving the right to vote. We know when women got the right to vote, but an interesting question is when did they deserve the right to vote? It's not exactly the same topic. And you could say the same thing for the men who are voting, because the franchise, it's called the franchise, extended to different classes of men before it extended to women. And now the whole idea of this is that you have to deserve the right. You have to, it doesn't make any sense just to have the right to vote if you're an idiot, if you don't care about logic, grammar. I mean, come on, guys. This is very complicated stuff. You're going to say that you're the boss of the president of the United States? Well, then you better be able to follow what's going on. And I don't mean follow somebody on Instagram and put a little heart there. Oh, yeah, look what I did. I mean, you have to be able to follow, have an attention span. You have to be able to read and understand language. That's as a necessary condition, not a sufficient condition. Those are necessary conditions. Okay, let's continue. Jesus Christ said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." John 8:32. The new motto of St. John's College, Annapolis, Maryland, by the way, Leonard Strauss taught there. I had a colleague at Moorpark College, in the philosophy department, Jerry Kaplan, who was Leonard Strauss's TA at St. John's College. He had a bunch of Leonard Strauss papers. And I was like, I should have taken him off his hands for him. I mean, like he was looking for a thing to do. Like, I think he eventually gave them to St. John's College, which I think is probably the appropriate thing to do. Hopefully, they have an archivist there that knows what to do with those things. Those are very helpful for researchers. Don't throw those away, Jerry. Hello. Anyway, I don't think he did. I'm hoping he didn't. Jerry got his PhD at Catholic University in D.C., PhD in philosophy. Okay, so the new motto of St. John's College, Annapolis, Maryland, expresses the purpose of a liberal arts college with an interesting play on the etymology of liberal. Fascio liberos ex liberis, libris libraque. I make free men of children by means of books and a balance laboratory experiments. Okay. Science and art, bottom page 5. Each of the liberal arts is both a science and an art in the sense that in the province of each there is something to know. A science, that's from the Latin scientia, which is pertaining to knowledge, and something to do, an art. An art may be used successfully before one has formal knowledge of its precepts. Page 6 at the top. For example, a child of 3 may use correct grammar, even though the child knows nothing of formal grammar. Similarly, logic and rhetoric may be effectively used by those who do not know the precepts of these arts. It is, however, desirable and satisfying to acquire a clear knowledge of the precepts and to know why certain forms of expression or thought are right and wrong. The trivium is the organon or instrument of all education at all levels because the arts of logic, grammar, and rhetoric are the arts of communication itself in that they govern the means of communication, namely reading, writing, speaking, and listening. I love that she put listening in there. Way to go, Sister Miriam Joseph. Way to go. Thinking is inherent in these 4 activities. Reading and listening, for example, although relatively passive, involve active thinking, for we agree or disagree with what we read or hear. The trivium is used vitally when it is exercised in reading and composition. It was systematically and intensively exercised in the reading of the Latin classics and in the composition of Latin prose and verse by boys in the grammar schools of England and the continent during the 16th century. This was the training that formed the intellectual habits of Shakespeare and other Renaissance writers. The result of it appears in their work. And then there's a reference here to T.W. Baldwin, William Shakespeare's Small Latin and Lessee Greek. That's University of Illinois, 1944. The trivium was basic also in the curriculum of classical times, the Middle Ages, and the post-Renaissance. In the Greek grammar of Dionysius Thrax, that's 166 BC, the oldest extant book on grammar and the basis for grammatical texts for at least 13 centuries. Grammar is defined in so comprehensive a manner that it includes versification, rhetoric, and literary criticism. Here's a block quotation from that. Grammar is an experimental knowledge of the uses of language. As generally current among poets and prose writers, it is divided into 6 parts. 1. Trained reading with due regard to prosody, versification. 2. Exposition according to the poetic figures, that's rhetoric. 3. Ready statement of dialectical peculiarities and allusion. 4. Discovery of etymologies. 5. The accurate account of analogies. 6. Criticism of poetical productions, which is the noblest part of grammatical art. End quote from Dionysius Thrax, the oldest extant book on grammar from around 166 BC. Page 6 at the bottom. Because communication involves the simultaneous exercise of logic, grammar, and rhetoric, these 3 arts are the fundamental arts of education, of teaching, and of being taught. I'm going to read that again. Because communication involves the simultaneous exercise of logic, grammar, and rhetoric, these 3 arts are the fundamental arts of education, of teaching, and of being taught. I love that she puts being taught in there. Very good. Very good. Accordingly, page 7 at the top, they must be practiced simultaneously by both teacher and pupil. Excellent job, Miriam Joseph. Oh my gosh, she probably was a disciplinarian in the classroom. Oh, love it. That's what's missing in our classrooms, discipline. Everything's on the teacher. Yeah. No, you have to discipline the pupil. Otherwise, the art of being taught is not there. It's not being perfected. They're not going to get anything. It's a disaster for our entire country. You want to F around, you're going to find out. But the problem is I'm here too, and I don't want to find out because I already know. And I don't want to wait around for you to find out if you're one of these slow pokes. That's why we're doing the podcast to try to speed you up. Some of you guys are way behind, way behind. So, but you're here and good for you. Yeah, you're making progress. So you should be happy and proud. Good job. I'm going to cheer you on as long as you're not bowing out like a D-bag. The pupil must cooperate with the teacher. He must be active, not passive. Very good. One thing that you can do to be active is go out and get this book, The Trivium. The Liberal Arts of Logic, Grammar, and Rhetoric by Sister Miriam Joseph. Get it. Follow along. You don't have to get this version of it. Get it used, you know? Follow along. Take good notes. Have some discipline with what's coming up. I would prefer to be there in person with you. That's where the magic really happens. But we do what we can because, we have to go through this medium because I'm not there with you. You may not have money to pay me to be there with you. Okay. The pupil must cooperate with the teacher. See, I can't enforce that right now in this situation. If you're messing up as a pupil, I can't discipline you. Ordinarily, I'd be a pretty strict disciplinarian in the classroom. The pupil must cooperate with the teacher. Why? Because communication involves the simultaneous exercise of logic, grammar, and rhetoric. These three arts are the fundamental arts of education. If they're fundamental, that means education ain't happening without them. These three arts are the fundamental arts of education, of teaching, and of being taught, which means if they're not there, you're not being taught. It doesn't matter what the teacher is doing, how good the teacher is. If this pupil doesn't have them and the pupil does not have discipline, the pupil does not have the art perfected of being perfected of being taught. And Sister Miriam Joseph is saying here, accordingly, they must be practiced simultaneously by both teacher and pupil. No excuses. Stop with the excuses. The pupil must cooperate with the teacher. He must be active, not passive. The teacher may be present either directly or indirectly. When one studies a book, the author is a teacher, indirectly present through the book. Communication, as the etymology of the word signifies, results in something possessed in common. It is a oneness shared. Communication takes place only when two minds really meet. If the reader or listener receives the same ideas and emotions that the writer or speaker wished to convey, he understands, although he may disagree. If he receives no ideas, he does not understand. If different ideas, he misunderstands. The same principles of logic, grammar, and rhetoric guide writer, reader, speaker, and listener. The liberal arts education, page 7. Education is the highest of arts in the sense that it imposes forms, ideas, and ideals, not on matter as do other arts, for instance, carpentry or sculpture, but on the mind. These forms are received by the student, not passively, but through active cooperation. In true liberal education, as Newman explained, the essential activity of the student is to relate the facts learned into a unified organic whole, to assimilate them as the body assimilates food, or as the rose assimilates food from the soil and increases in size, vitality, and beauty. A learner must use mental hooks and eyes to join the facts together to form a significant whole. This makes learning easier, more interesting, and more valuable. You could also say enjoyable as well. The the accumulation of facts is mere information and not worthy to be called education since it burdens the mind and stultifies it instead of developing, enlightening, and perfecting it. Even if one forgets many of the facts once learned and related, the mind retains the vigor and perfection gained by its exercise upon them. It can do this, however, only by grappling with facts and ideas. Moreover, it is much easier to remember related ideas than unrelated ideas. Each of the liberal arts has come to be understood not in the narrow sense of a single subject, but rather in the sense of a group of related subjects. The trivium in itself, a tool or a skill, has become associated with the most appropriate subject matter, the languages, oratory, literature, history, philosophy. The quadrivium comprises not only mathematics, but many branches of science. The theory of number includes not merely arithmetic, but also algebra, calculus, and the theory of equations, and other branches of higher mathematics. Page 8 at the top. The applications of the theory of number include not only music, here understood as musical principles like those of harmony, which constitute the liberal art of music and must be distinguished from applied instrumental music, which is a fine art. Remember, fine art versus liberal art. Okay. The MFA. Yeah, have you ever heard of that degree? It's traditionally a terminal degree, which means when you get it, you die. Um, MFA, I know you were thinking it stands for a cuss word, but it's Master of Fine Arts, okay? FYI. And yes, I was kidding about terminal and okay. I have a very dry sense of humor, except for when I'm in the shower. Oh boy. I gotta get back. I gotta get back to this, okay? Yeah. The applications, I should have said in a swimming pool, but that doesn't, never mind. Whatever. Who cares? Or in the ocean. The applications of the theory of number include not only music, here understood as musical principles like those of harmony, which constitute the liberal arts of music and must be distinguished from applied instrumental music, which is a fine art, but also physics, much of chemistry, and other forms of scientific measurement of discrete quantities. The theory of space includes analytic geometry and trigonometry. Applications of the theory of space include principles of architecture, geography, surveying, and engineering. Engineering because you have to drive the train through geography. Okay. The three R's, reading, writing, and reckoning, constitute the core not only of elementary education, but also of higher education, where the only thing higher now are the students, now that pot is legalized, and the grades that are not earned because of grade inflation. Uh, Competence in the use of language and competence in handling abstractions, particularly mathematical quantities, are regarded as the most reliable indexes to a student's intellectual caliber. Accordingly, tests have been devised to measure these skills, and guidance programs in colleges and in the armed forces, yeah, have been based on the results of such tests. The three arts of language provide discipline of mind, in as much as mind finds expression in language. The four arts of quantity provide means for the study of matter, in as much as quantity, more precisely extension, is the outstanding characteristic of matter. Extension is a characteristic of matter only, whereas number is a characteristic of both matter and spirit. The function of the trivium is the training of the mind for the study of matter and spirit. You see how this relates to the philosophy of human nature? If you think of the human person as merely matter, what she's saying is not going to make any sense to you. But she's talking about matter and spirit, which together constitute the sum of reality. She's talking about metaphysics here. We've covered that quite a bit on the podcast with the fundamentals of metaphysics, Rob Coons from the University of Texas. Was actually one of my former professors at Biola. He taught a logic class there, a symbolic logic class. So really, really special man. I would highly recommend you follow Rob Coons and get his books and try to understand them if you can. They're quite advanced, but if you grab one of his books, specifically the fundamentals one that I mentioned, you might. He wrote that with Tim Pickavants, who's one of my classmates, colleagues. I think he was a little bit ahead of me in the program, although he's younger than me. Um, but there's a couple of different versions of that textbook. There's a more advanced book, version. In any case, it's worth having on your bookshelf if you can afford it, or having it on the bookshelf of if you run a school, you definitely want to have that on the bookshelf because it gives some it gives these kids something to aim for and something to measure themselves by and try to, and not that you make yourself feel bad, but just try to understand what people are talking about when they talk about reality and metaphysics. That's very important. I would say the same for epistemology as well. Philosophy is very important here. Logic is traditionally part of philosophy, which is why I'm beating the philosophy drum here. Okay, so what I'm saying is, in terms of the liberal arts, philosophy is absolutely essential. Theology as well. Okay, well, let's keep going. Um, I think Miriam, Sister Joseph would say, can you get back to my discussing me? This is about me, right? Okay. Yeah, you're right. I'll get back to it. Well, oh, where are we at? Where are we at? Where are we at? Okay, the function of the trivium is the training of the mind for the study of matter and spirit, which together constitute the sum of reality. The fruit of education is culture, which Matthew Arnold defined as the knowledge of ourselves, mind, and the world, matter. In the sweetness and light of Christian culture, which adds to the knowledge of the world and ourselves the knowledge of God and of other spirits, we are enabled truly to see life steadily and see it whole. Hmm. The language arts, the language arts and reality. The three language arts can be defined as they relate to reality and to each other. Metaphysics or ontology, the science of being, is concerned with reality, with the things as it exists, the thing as it exists. Logic, grammar, and rhetoric have the following relation to reality. Logic is concerned with the thing as it is known. Grammar is concerned with the thing as it is symbolized. Rhetoric is concerned with the thing as it is communicated. Here's an illustration. Relationship between metaphysics and language arts, page 9 at the top. The discovery of the planet Pluto in 1930 illustrates the relationship between metaphysics and the language arts. The planet Pluto had been a real entity traveling in its orbit about our sun for centuries. Its discovery in 1930 did not create it. By being discovered, however, it became in 1930 for the first time a logical entity. When it was named Pluto, it became a grammatical entity. When by its name, knowledge of it was communicated to others through the spoken word and also through the written word, the planet Pluto became a rhetorical entity. I don't know if that would that was really helpful. It wasn't really that helpful for me. Sorry, Sister Miriam. I wouldn't have used that one, but but that's all right. We're just using the ones that she gave right there. I don't want to be too nitpicky. Rhetoric is the master art of the trivium, for it presupposes and makes use of grammar and logic. It is the art of communicating through symbols ideas about reality. Comparison of materials, functions, and norms of the language arts. The language arts guide the speaker, writer, listener, and reader in the correct and effective use of language. Phonetics and spelling, which are allied to the art of grammar, are included here to show their relationship to the other language arts in materials, functions, and norms. Phonetics prescribes how to combine sounds so as to form spoken words correctly. Spelling prescribes how to combine letters so as to form written words correctly. Grammar prescribes how to combine words so as to form sentences correctly. Notice correctly, that adverb over and over again. Rhetoric prescribes how to combine sentences into paragraphs and paragraphs into whole composition, having unity, coherence, and the desired emphasis, as well as clarity, force, and beauty. Logic prescribes, notice that word, prescribes, how to combine concepts into judgments and judgments into syllogisms and chains of reasoning so as to achieve truth. All right. Okay, language arts, their materials and functions. Because rhetoric aims for effectiveness rather than correctness, it deals not only with the paragraph and the whole composition, but also with the word and the sentence, for it prescribes that diction be clear. Here's page 10 at the top, and appropriate, and that sentences be varied in structure and rhythm. It recognizes various levels of discourse, such as the literary, maiden or damsel, steed, the common, girl, horse, the illiterate, gal, hoss, the slang, skirt, plug, wow, the technical, homo sapien, equus, caballus, each with its appropriate use. The adaptation of language to circumstance, which is a function of rhetoric, requires the choice of a certain style and diction in speaking to adults, of a different style in presenting scientific ideas to a general public, and of another in presenting them to a group of scientists. Since rhetoric is the master art of the trivium, it may even enjoin the use of bad grammar or bad logic, as in the portrayal of an illiterate or stupid character in a story. Just as rhetoric is the master art of the trivium, so logic is the art of arts because it directs the very act of reason, which directs all other human acts to their proper end through the means it determines. In the preface to his Art of Logic, the poet Milton remarks, and this is a block quote, the general matter of the general arts is either reason or speech. They are employed either in perfecting reason for the sake of proper thinking, as in logic, or in perfecting speech, and that either for the sake of the correct use of words, as in grammar, or the effective use of words, as in rhetoric. Of all the arts, the first and Most general is logic, then grammar, and last of all, rhetoric, since much use, there can be much use of reason without speech, but no use of speech without reason. We gave the second place to grammar because correct speech can be unadorned, but it can hardly be adorned before it is correct. That's an end quote there, the end of that quote. Because the arts of language are normative, they are practical studies as a contrasted with the speculative. A speculative study is one that merely seeks to know. For example, astronomy. We can merely know about the heavenly bodies. We can't influence their movements. A practical normative study is one that seeks to regulate, to bring into conformity with a norm or standard. For example, ethics. The norm of ethics is the good, and its purpose is to bring human conduct into conformity with goodness. So correctness is the norm of phonetics, spelling, and grammar. Effectiveness is the norm of rhetoric. Truth is the norm of logic. Correctness in thinking is the norm. The normal means to reach truth, which is the conformity of thought, which things as they are with reality. All right. I'm not really embellishing much here as far as her use of these terms. I would only add here that in her use of the term truth as the norm of logic, the word truth often is put in as a proper study of epistemology, but it also belongs to the study of metaphysics. Um, the reason I say that truth is an element of epistemology is because episteme means knowledge. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. And I'm not aware of any philosopher or any technical expert on epistemology that would claim truth is irrelevant to knowledge. In fact, I'd say that just the opposite. They would say truth is a fundamental component of knowledge, of knowing. But it's not the only one. Um, Also, belief, that is the relationship in terms of a doxastic attitude, a mental state, a specific kind of attitude that the subject has toward an object or a state of affairs, and what produces that, whether it's evidence, whether you call it evidence or however you put it, the issue of evidence or justification. Sometimes it's called warrant, sometimes it's called proper function, sometimes it's called reliable faculties or whatever. Let's just say evidence. I think logic is, um, it can be evidence. It can be like a chain of reasoning can be evidence for something. And I think that's really what she's missing here is any reference to epistemology, is my point. So I'm not going to beat that drum too hard, but I think proper, at least mention it. You should mention epistemology because I think the lights didn't really go on for me until I took epistemology. I took metaphysics first. I took philosophical ethics first. I took so many things first before epistemology and actually before logic too, if you can believe that. I know, I know, I know. I took a lot of biblical studies before I took hermeneutics because I was required to take biblical studies, biblical criticism. Um, but they didn't require hermeneutics. It was more of an advanced course at the undergraduate. And then at the graduate level, it was a basic course, which I thought that was the right way to do it at the graduate level. And I think of logic as a basic course like hermeneutics. Um, I think epistemology is the next. Ideally, you take epistemology and logic at the same time, or take logic first, I would say. Anyway, I'm probably boring you. Of course, a lot of it has to do with your schedule. Like, I didn't have total control of my schedule. So I only had a certain amount of number of years to devote to study. And if metaphysics comes up right away, I had to jump on it. I had to take the class and I had to do the best I could with what I had. And then, sometimes you have to fight for your schedule. My gosh, they didn't want to offer logic at Denver Seminary. It used to be offered all the time. And then when Gordon Lewis retired, they stopped offering it. Well, what they told me was that there was not enough people that would sign up for it, which is horrible. My thought was make it a required class. But these conversations are behind closed doors, and um, probably the reason they dropped it as a requirement is because they were afraid of losing the entire program if students don't sign up for it. But isn't that sad? We had 5 people sign up for it, and finally, the dean at the time was the professor of hermeneutics, Kermit Eckelbarger. And Kermit had his PhD from the University of Chicago. I mean, he was legit, dude. He was legit. The others had their PhDs from the medieval universities in England or Scotland. And anyway, I told uh, Kermit D. Frog over there, I told Dr. Eckelbarger, I said, if you deny us this logic class, which we're asking for, and Gordon Lewis has offered to teach it. He taught it for 40 years. PhD in philosophy from Syracuse. If you deny us this, it would be like students coming to you as a professor of hermeneutics, asking you, begging you to please teach us hermeneutics, and you saying no because students don't like to sign up for it. How does that strike you? Next thing you know, we had the class. I used rhetoric. I see, but in order to get logic. True story. True story. That was a great class too. And then I ended up teaching logic for a long time. 20 years. That's long for me. If I hadn't taken that class, I mean, that turned out to be a fundamental advocacy that I was doing for what I ended up making money at later for years. Oh man. And it was a great background for law, for public law and American politics. Fantastic. So what I'm saying is you sometimes you have to advocate. You have to fight for your schedule. And it doesn't always go the way, you know, it ideally should go. You have to make practical considerations and get in there and do the best you can for your education. The intellect itself is perfected in its operation by the 5 intellectual virtues. 3 speculative, 2 practical. Understanding is the intuitive grasp of first principles. For example, of contradictory statements, One must be true, the other false. Science is knowledge of proximate causes, physics, mathematics, economics, etc. Wisdom is knowledge of ultimate causes, metaphysics in the natural order, theology in the supernatural order. Prudence is right reason about something to be done. Art is right reason about something to be made. That's the end of the chapter called The Liberal Arts. The next chapter is called The Nature and Function of Language, chapter 2. And we'll get into that and the next time. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. I've been your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. I spent 6 years in seminary. I got 2 degrees during that time, one in a Master of Arts in Biblical Literature and Culture and Theology, basically called Biblical Studies, but it was Biblical Literature, Culture, Theology, History, Biblical Criticism. During that time, I studied really foundational philosophical skills like metaphysics, philosophical ethics, logic, epistemology, social ethics, method and apologetic reasoning, etc., etc. Then I earned a second master's in philosophy, where I studied more metaphysics, more epistemology, a little bit more theology, some philosophy of religion, some ethics, and a little bit more advanced logic, symbolic logic with Rob Coons. Turned out to be the first class I ever taught was symbolic logic, if you can believe that. Yeah, they threw me into the deep end right away. Later, I figured out nobody else wanted to teach the class. That's why they did that. Well, anyway, then I went to get a PhD in public law and American politics. That took 11 years. Great fun, constitutional law, um, separation of powers, individual liberty, and the American regime. And that was wonderful. It was a wonderful time. And I'm here to try to give back a little about what I've gotten before I die, before I lose it. You got to keep up with it or you lose it. It's not something that's handed down to you from the heavens. You got to fight for it. You got to, you have to put the effort in as a pupil. And I did that, and I'm offering it to you as a teacher, but you as a pupil have to level up in order to receive it and apply it to your life. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. It's for January 2025, 2026 years after Jesus. It's a Sunday, the 11th day of Christmas in the Anglican tradition. We'll see you in a few days. First episode of 2026. God bless you. See ya.